What has Kamala Harris done for us? When a politician promises you the world tomorrow, look first at what they did for you just yesterday. And the best indicator of future behavior from a politician, of course, is their past behavior. And that's the crux of Kamala's problem, because her past behavior as Joe Biden's vice president is precisely why our country is falling apart. Between orchestrating an unprecedented border invasion to spending billions of taxpayer dollars on a pointless war between Russia and Ukraine to hiding the truth about Biden's cognitive decline, her legacy is one of complete chaos and deception. And yet, now she wants to be promoted from vice president to president, as if she's not completely unfit and unqualified for the job. Kamala is arguably the least fit presidential candidate our nation has ever seen. And if we're smart, then we'll be sure not to vote for her in this election. There's just too much at risk to take the huge gamble of a Kamala presidency. And this fact ought to be crystal clear to anyone and everyone this week, given her recent string of joint campaign events with disgraced ex-Congresswoman Liz Cheney. It is painfully ironic to see them together on the campaign trail this week. However, their coordinated campaign blitz suggests that Kamala and her staff are extremely desperate for a viral moment. They're frantically trying to orchestrate her breakthrough moment, where she finally becomes the nation's darling coalition builder, just like Barack Obama many years ago, but they continue to come up short. Which brings us to her campaign stops yesterday. Her first stop was in Malvern, Pennsylvania, which lies right outside of Philadelphia, where she tried to court the favor of Democrats and Republicans, but it didn't go well for her or for Liz, of course. And during the early portion of that discussion, the moderator, Sarah Longwell, asked Liz about why she's campaigning for Kamala Harris when she's allegedly a Republican. And while her response was less than great, Kamala's, of course, was disqualifying.
If I can just echo the Congresswoman's point. So I've now, as vice president, met over 150 world leaders. Presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, and kings, many of them multiple times, to the point we're on a first-name basis. And the last few times I've seen them in the relative eve of this election, they are very concerned, our allies. Because as you know, when we walk in those rooms around the world representing the United States of America, we have traditionally been able to walk in those rooms, chin up, shoulders back, with the self-appointed and earned authority to talk about the importance of democracies and rule of law. But as all the role models here know, as a role model, people watch what you do to see if it lines up with what you say. People around the world are watching this. And I tell you, sometimes I do fret a bit about whether we as Americans truly understand how important we are to the world.
Yeah, right. And by the way, speak into the microphone so we can actually hear you. And look, to her credit, this country is extremely important to the world. That is true. And there is a great deal at stake in this election. Absolutely. Not just for us, but for people everywhere. And that's why it would be wise of us to back the man with a proven track record as commander-in-chief, instead of rolling the dice on a candidate who has completely undermined our national security right here at home and abroad on the world stage. For example, according to official ICE statistics, hundreds of thousands of convicted criminals have infiltrated our southern border under her watch to prey on innocent Americans like Laken Riley. And she doesn't even seem to care. Her campaign's messaging is all about hope and joy and optimism for the future. But there's nothing hopeful or joyful or joyous, of course, about her record of allowing violent foreign gangs into this country, such as Tren de Aragua. And that's only one aspect of how her policies have directly harmed the American people. But let's get back to this joint event with Liz Cheney, because she was given several opportunities to clearly articulate her vision for the nation's future. But her responses were spectacular blunders each and every time. For instance, her campaign has routinely said that this election is about metaphorically turning the page in order to choose a new way forward. However, when she was asked to elaborate on this slogan, she went right into her standard word salad mode.
So I do want to ask you another question, though, before we go to the audience. You talk a lot about a new way forward. You talk about turning the page. What's on the next page? Talk to us about
You want a preview?
Yeah, give me a spoiler alert. You know, just tell us what's the rest of the chapter.
Well, first of all, I will say that it is a metaphor that is meant to also describe my intention to embark on a new generation of leadership. And needless to say, mine will not be a continuation of the Biden administration. I bring to it my own ideas, my own experiences. But it is also about moving past what, frankly, I think has been the last decade of the American discourse being influenced by Donald Trump.
Yes. So turning the page is really just a metaphor for undoing Trump's political legacy of low prices, high wages, secure borders, and world peace. Copy that, Comrade Kamala. Copy that. But one can't help but wonder, I should say, though, why she continues to make major media appearances at all, given her utter inability to articulate anything remotely interesting or unique about herself or the country itself. And that brings us to another awkward moment of hers in an attempt to inspire voters by discussing the spirit of the American people.
The spirit of the American people is such that, we are an ambitious people. We are aspirational. We have dreams. And that is productive. It is not productive of us to be a nation of people who are pointing fingers at one another, who don't understand that the vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. So that's what I mean about turning the page. And then a new generation of leadership about being ambitious, about all we have yet to do. Part of my economic policy, I refer to it as an opportunity economy, is about investing in American industries while leaving none of our traditional wonderful industries behind, repurposing and retooling the factories that have led to America's success in industry, while at the same time redefining how we are thinking about which worker has the experience and skill to do the job and is qualified, and understanding we shouldn't be falling into a trap that suggests only those with a college degree have the skill or the experience to do the job. So let's look at how we redefine and perhaps even reorder.
Yikes. But looking on the bright side, I guess, for her campaign here, many people have already forgotten about those verbal blunders yesterday in Pennsylvania, thanks to the ones made by her running mate, Tim Walz, on The View. They asked him several questions, but got zero real answers in return, including when they asked him if he would change any of the policies that were implemented by the Biden-Harris administration.
Governor, voters are saying change is a critical issue this election. But our ABC poll shows only a third of Americans believe a Harris-Walz ticket would bring that change. I want to pose a similar question to you that we asked Vice President Harris. Can you point to a policy decision over the last 4 years that you and the Vice President would have handled differently from President Biden?
Well, I think this expansion on Medicare is something that I wished would have been proposed sooner. But look, they're tackling the issues that they needed to. They came out of a pandemic that Donald Trump had left a mess for, an economy with supply chains that were broken. But I think focusing on this care economy, the two things that the Vice President proposed that I hear everywhere, especially in rural America, is this issue of affordability on child care and the ability of seniors to get health care, protecting that. So I think just in this last week, you saw a major rollout in protecting rural hospitals. This is a big issue. We have ambulance deserts in large parts of America, Minnesota included, where you can't do that. And I think she's really leaning into these issues that impact people personally, and then doubling down on whether it's housing or child tax credit. Those are pretty big differences. And I don't think that's a pejorative towards it. There were other issues that were being dealt with, and she's her own leader. She's got her own path, a new way forward. And I think she sees in Minnesota that we have similar values, whether it's providing kids with meals at school. We're putting meals in our schools and trying to get guns out of them. That seems like a good thing.
So why the hell did Joy Behar clap for him when he didn't even answer the question that he was asked? He avoided the main point of the whole thing altogether because the answer is quite an indictment of Kamala, and yet she applauded his response anyway. He was also, of course, asked about his long record of exaggerating, or in some cases simply lying, about his past, including his history of falsely claiming to have served in a combat zone while he was in the National Guard. Now, nobody is denying that he served for 24 years. That much is true. However, people are rightfully skeptical of him because he has lied about being in a war zone during that time for his own political gain, which is tantamount to stolen valor. They did ask him about it, although they still treated him with kid gloves by demeaning President Trump in the process.
Governor, I want to ask you, and thank you for being here. You've been asked before, but I want to ask this way about a number of misstatements you'd made about your previous military record and travels you'd been in. I want to be unequivocal. Nobody lies as much as Donald Trump. Nothing that you've misled on is anything on the same level. But in an era where there's so much mistruth in our politics, so many lies, can't there be no gray area? And how would you convey to voters they may be concerned that there's a trust issue?
Yeah, I do think you have to be careful about this. If it's stating, in Hong Kong in August of '89, 35 years ago, I think people do separate that between a pathological liar like Donald Trump. They get it out there. But I do think it's important that we're careful about how we speak. It's something for me is, I think, being a teacher, being a coach, I just speak from my heart. I speak honestly. I speak in the moment. And in preparing for a debate, I told my team that I felt like I'm at a disadvantage in a debate because my tendency is to just answer the question that you're asked as quickly as you can, which seems
That's never what you do in a debate.
Never, that's right. They would say that. So yeah, I think so. But I think the public sees this, just the massive amount of misinformation that gets poured out there. It is important to be detailed.
Once again, he didn't even answer the question, not even a little bit, not even a tiny bit. He just completely avoided it to push more propaganda, and they all went crazy for it. They ate it up like caviar. Clearly, he and Kamala are hiding their real policy agenda, as well as their own track records in office, but it's a futile effort at the end of the day because the truth always comes out, no matter how deeply one tries to bury it.